All right, so you know how sometimes you say no to someone and their reaction kind of tells you everything you need to know about them?
Oh, yeah.
Like right away?
Yeah, totally.
It's like, ooh, okay, red flag.
Yep.
We're diving into that today with this idea, what do they do with your no?
I love that.
It's based on this message by Tyrese Gibson that went kind of viral.
Yeah, a lot of people resonated with that.
I think it's because it's so relatable, like we've all been there.
Definitely. And it actually connects to some deeper psych and sociology stuff too.
Oh, really? Okay, so this is going to get interesting.
It is for sure.
So Tyrese Gibson, what do they do with your no? What's the gist?
So basically he's saying, pay attention to how people act when you tell them no.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when their true colors show.
Oh, yeah?
He actually had this super powerful quote. It was like, if someone becomes angry, dismissive, or tries to manipulate you after you say no, it's a red flag.
Whoa. Yeah, that hit hard.
Yeah.
I think we've all had those moments where someone just flips out when you say no.
Totally. And it can be so jarring because really a respectful response to a no should acknowledge the other person's boundaries,
Right, like you're allowed to say no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not an attack on them. It's just you stating your limits.
So it's not about the disagreement itself. It's how they handle it.
You got it. And that's where psychology comes in big time.
Oh, interesting. Okay, lay it on me.
So have you ever heard of boundaries?
Like setting boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. So think of them as invisible lines we draw around ourselves.
Invisible lines, I like that.
Right. They define what we're okay with and what we're not okay with.
It's about protecting yourself.
Absolutely. It's
Uh-huh.
crucial for our mental well-being and self-respect.
And when someone disrespects those lines, you can really feel it.
Oh, for sure. Now there's this fascinating psych theory that kind of explains how different people deal with, no, it's called attachment theory.
Attachment theory, I've heard of that, but like a refresher would be great.
Okay, so basically attachment theory says our early relationships, especially with like our parents or caregivers, shape how we handle relationships as adults.
Yeah. Like, do we feel secure or anxious or avoidant in relationships?
Oh, right. And that can affect how we react to rejection too.
Exactly. So someone with a secure attachment style, they're more comfortable with no.
Because they're secure in themselves.
Yep. Their self-worth doesn't depend on everyone always saying yes to them.
So they can handle a no without falling apart.
Exactly. Now, on the flip side, people with insecure attachment styles might struggle more with no.
Oh, because they might be used to having to fight for attention or validation.
Exactly. And so when they hear no, it triggers all those anxieties and insecurities.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've got attachment styles. What else plays a role here?
Well, another big one is emotional intelligence, EQ.
Oh, EQ.
Yeah.
That's about like understanding and managing emotions, right?
You got it. So someone with high EQ, they're going to be more empathetic, more self-aware.
They can put themselves in the other person's shoes.
Right. They can see that no isn't necessarily about them personally, but about the other person's needs.
Like, oh, you're tired tonight. That's cool. I get it. Exactly. They can handle those negative emotions like disappointment without lashing out or making the other person feel bad.
So basically, good communication skills.
Exactly. Now, someone with lower EQ might struggle to regulate those feelings.
And they might react in a way that's not so healthy.
Right. Like maybe they get defensive or try to guilt trip the other person.
Okay, so attachment style, EQ, and is there anything else?
One more big one, self-esteem.
Oh, self-esteem. How does that fit in?
Well, people with high self-esteem, they're less likely to take no personally.
Because they already feel good about themselves.
Exactly. They have a strong sense of self-worth that doesn't depend on what other people think.
A no doesn't, like, shatter their world.
Right. But for someone with lower self-esteem, a no can be way more triggering.
Like it might make them feel inadequate or rejected.
Exactly. And that can lead them to try and manipulate the situation or pressure the person to change their mind.
So they can feel better about themselves.
Right. So we've got attachment theory, EQ, and self-esteem all influencing how people respond to no.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack, but it makes sense.
It does, and there's a whole other layer to this too, the sociological dimension.
Ooh, okay, so now we're moving beyond individual psychology to look at the bigger picture.
Exactly. Sociology helps us understand how those bigger social forces like power dynamics and cultural norms shape our behavior in relationships.
Interesting. Okay, give me an example.
Well, historically, many societies have had these power imbalances, often with men having more power than women.
Like those traditional gender roles where men were supposed to be dominant and women were supposed to be submissive.
Exactly. And in those dynamics, a woman saying no could be seen as challenging a man's authority.
Like rocking the boat.
Yeah, and that could lead to all sorts of problems.
So a simple no can have all this extra baggage because of these societal expectations.
Exactly, and it can make things really tricky in relationships.
Especially for women.
Right, because women might feel pressured to say yes even when they don't want to.
Because they've been taught to be agreeable or prioritize the man's needs.
Exactly, and that can lead to resentment down the line.
And then when they do finally say no, it can trigger a huge reaction.
You got it, that no can be seen as a threat to the man's control.
And that can lead to all sorts of bad behavior.
Like manipulation, guilt tripping, even aggression.
So these power dynamics can make setting boundaries a real minefield, especially for women.
It's definitely something to be aware of, and it's not just about gender either. These dynamics can play out in any relationship where there's an imbalance.
Like boss, employee, parent, child, even some friendships.
Exactly. Anywhere where one person has more power than the other, that no becomes more loaded.
This is fascinating. We've covered so much ground already.
We have from individual psychology to the bigger social forces that shape how we handle boundaries.
And it all goes back to Tyrese Gibson's message.
Yeah.
Pay attention to how people react to your no.
Right. It's a way to gauge their respect for you and spot those red flags in a relationship.
Wow, this is so insightful. It's like those subtle cues can tell you so much.
They really can, and that awareness can help you make better decisions about the relationships you choose.
This has been mind-blowing. I feel like we need more time to digest all of this.
I agree. We've just scratched the surface. We'll have to dive deeper next time.
I can't wait.
Me neither. Okay, so welcome back to our deep dive into what do they do with your no?
I'm ready for more.
We've been talking about all the psychology and social stuff around boundaries.
Yeah, and how things can go wrong when those boundaries aren't respected.
Right. But let's flip the script for a sec. What about when no is respected?
Like, how does that actually make relationships better?
That's the million-dollar question, and it's something Tyrese Gibson talked about too.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff. It's actually good for relationships.
Exactly. Respecting no is like the foundation for a healthy connection.
I never thought of it that way, but it makes sense.
Think about it. All the things we want in relationships, open communication, trust, feeling empowered, all of that thrives when no is respected.
Okay, I'm curious, how does respecting no actually lead to better communication?
Imagine a relationship where you feel totally safe to say no.
Like without being judged or pressured.
Exactly. In that environment, you're way more likely to be honest about your feelings.
You can speak your truth.
Right, because you know you're not going to be punished for having needs or setting limits.
So no doesn't shut down the conversation, it actually opens it up.
It leads to deeper understanding and connection.
So it's a communication tool.
Exactly. And that feeling of safety is also connected to empowerment.
Empowerment, how so?
When your no is respected, you feel like you have control over your own life.
Like your choices matter.
Exactly. You feel validated, and that can boost your self-esteem.
Especially if you've been in relationships where your no was ignored.
Right. It can be a real game changer.
And then there's trust.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
When you know someone will honor your no, even if it's inconvenient for them.
That builds a deep level of trust.
It's like you know they have your back.
Exactly. And that creates emotional safety, which is so important in any close relationship.
Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff. What happens when no is not respected?
That's when things can get messy, and unfortunately, it's way too common.
I can imagine it's like that trust gets broken.
Exactly. It creates an imbalance where one person's needs are always coming first.
And that can lead to those toxic behaviors we talked about.
Right. The anger, the dismissal, the manipulation, all those red flags.
It can be a sign that someone doesn't really respect you.
And it's not always these big dramatic things. Sometimes it's those subtle patterns of being ignored or dismissed.
Like always getting talked over or feeling pressured to do things you don't want to do.
Right. Those little things can add up and really take a toll on your self-esteem.
So even if it's not like full-blown abuse, it could still be really harmful.
Absolutely. And it's important to be aware of the potential for those patterns to escalate.
Like those little red flags can turn into bigger problems down the line.
Right. Sometimes those disrespectful behaviors are early warning signs of more serious abuse.
That's scary, but it's good to be aware of it.
It is. So we've talked about the good and the bad, but how do we actually get better at setting boundaries?
Yeah, because saying no can be hard, especially if you're a people pleaser.
It's definitely a skill that takes practice.
Oh, okay. So what are the tips?
First, clarity is key. Be direct and don't beat around the bush.
Just say no.
Exactly. And don't over-explain or apologize. Just state your boundary calmly and confidently.
Like, thanks for the invite, but I can't make it this time.
Perfect. And if someone keeps pushing, don't be afraid to repeat yourself.
Like a broken record.
Exactly. Just keep calmly restating your no until they get the message.
And if they still don't respect your boundaries?
Then you might need to set some consequences.
Consequences like what?
It could be anything from limiting contact to taking a break from the relationship.
So it's about showing them that you're serious about your boundaries.
Exactly. Actions speak louder than words.
And setting boundaries is an ongoing thing, right?
It is. Our needs and boundaries can change over time.
So what worked for you a year ago might not work for you now?
Exactly. It's about checking in with yourself regularly and adjusting your boundaries as needed.
So it's about staying true to yourself.
Right. And remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's self-care.
It's about protecting your well-being and creating relationships that are built on mutual respect.
Couldn't said it better myself.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground with this whole what do they do with your no thing.
We have from the psychology of boundaries to all those social dynamics.
But now I want to get down to brass tacks. Like how does this actually play out in different relationships?
You're right, because a no from your bestie hits different than a no from your boss.
Exactly. So let's start with romantic relationships, because those can be tricky.
They can, for sure. So where does no fit in with all that lovey-dovey stuff?
Yeah, spill the tea.
Well, respecting no in romantic relationships is all about building that foundation of trust and intimacy.
It's like recognizing that your partner is their own person with their own needs and boundaries.
Right. It's not about controlling them or trying to change them.
It's about respecting their individuality, even when it's not convenient for you.
Exactly. And that means respecting their no across the board, from little things to big decisions.
So it's about creating a space where both partners feel safe to say no without fear of repercussions.
Exactly. And sometimes that no isn't even a verbal thing.
Oh, like what do you mean?
It could be body language, change in tone of voice, anything that signals discomfort.
Like if your partner suggests going out and you're just not feeling it?
Right. You could say, honey, I'm super tired tonight. Maybe we can just chill at home.
Yeah, that's a no, but it's not a fight.
And a big part of respecting no is being attuned to those subtle cues, even when you don't fully understand them.
It's about putting their needs first, even when it's not what you want.
And this applies to everything from what to eat for dinner to major life choices.
It's about those open and honest conversations, finding compromises that work for both of you.
And sometimes that means accepting a no, even if it stings a little.
Because a healthy relationship isn't about always getting your way.
It's about mutual respect and finding that balance.
Okay, so romantic relationships. What about friendships?
Friendships need boundaries too,
Yeah.
maybe even more than we realize.
Yeah, sometimes we take our friends for granted or assume they'll always be down for whatever.
But that's not fair to them, and it can strain the friendship.
So how do we apply this what do they do with your no idea to friendships?
It's about recognizing that your friend has the right to say no, even to you.
Even to me. Wow, that's humbling.
It is, and a true friend will respect that no without making you feel guilty or rejected.
It's about understanding that their no doesn't mean they don't care.
Right. It just means they have their own limits and need to prioritize their well-being.
So it's about respecting their time, their energy, their needs, just like in a romantic relationship.
Exactly. And a healthy friendship is one where both people feel comfortable setting boundaries.
Without fear of losing the friendship.
Exactly. It's about that mutual respect and trust.
And it's about recognizing that those boundaries might change over time.
As your lives change, your priorities shift, the friendship has to adapt too.
It's about being flexible and communicative and supporting each other through those transitions.
Okay, we've talked about love and friendship. Let's tackle the workplace, because I feel like that's a different beast altogether.
Yeah, the workplace can be a minefield when it comes to boundaries.
It can, because those power dynamics are so much more pronounced.
You got your boss, your colleagues, clients. Everyone's got a different level of authority.
And it can be intimidating to assert yourself, especially if you're worried about your job.
So how do we handle those tricky situations where we need to say no in the workplace?
It takes courage, but setting boundaries at work is just as important as in your personal life.
So if your boss keeps piling on the work or asks you to do something outside your job description,
you have the right to say no, or at least negotiate a more reasonable solution.
it's about protecting your time and your energy.
And it doesn't have to be a big dramatic showdown.
Like you can be assertive, but still respectful.
Right. You could say, I appreciate the opportunity, but given my current workload, I'm not able to take on anything else right now.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's about being a team player, but also setting limits.
And remember, saying yes to everything can actually backfire.
It can lead to burnout, resentment, and even lower productivity.
So setting boundaries even if it feels uncomfortable, can actually benefit your career in the long run.
It shows you have self-respect, and it can lead to better working relationships.
Okay, so we've seen how what do they do with your no applies to all kinds of
It's
relationships.
like a universal principle for healthy connections.
It is. Pay attention to how people react to your no. It can tell you a lot.
That's such good advice. And remember, setting boundaries is a journey. It takes practice and courage.
But it's so worth it. It's about creating a life where you feel empowered and respected.
Absolutely. And that's what we all deserve.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into what do they do with your no?
It's been a real eye-opener. Thanks for listening.